Greetings, family, friends, and followers. I am Russ Schultz with the Police Officers Network at PONetwork.com. And today we are interviewing my friend and author, Dave Case. And we're going to talk a little bit about his writing, the books he has written, Out of Cabrini, Chicago Justice, Stand with the Dead, as well as a few other writing, short pieces. We're going to talk about his writing style, what he likes to write about, where he gets his inspiration, all things that you would want to know from an author and an expert in law enforcement and policing. How's that sound?
That sounds like somebody else, Russ. Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words.
So some of the background, you served as a Chicago police officer for over 30 years, 31 years, I believe, as a police lieutenant. When you retired from the Chicago Police Department, you serve as a patrol commander for the Broadview Police Department. And that's your law enforcement stuff, but you also do some teaching and some other things. Why don't you throw out a little bit of your other credentials and what you bring to the table here?
All right. Well, like you said, I was with Chicago for 31 years, did patrolman, sergeant, and lieutenant. With the majority, actually, I guess, was supervisor, which is kind of surprising. I was a patrolman for 14 years, sergeant for 9, and lieutenant for 8. So I think that all adds up to about 31. But
in
also
police math, it certainly does.
Right. So I finished my college degree. Well, once I came on the job, I'd started at the University of Minnesota. And when I came to Chicago, I put my education on pause. My lengthy education, because I'd been going to school for 5 years up there as it was, and got hired by Chicago. And after I got married, decided, let's go back and finish up the bachelor's degree, which I did. In that I was immersed in police work, I didn't really feel like doing a law enforcement degree, which of course is kind of bit me in the butt afterwards. So I went to a nearby college by the house, St. Xavier University in Mount Greenwood, and I finished that off. And what I discovered, I have a passion for oil painting and pastels and that sort of thing, but I need a studio. I need to be away from the phone, TV, family, everybody, to be able to concentrate. And it just wasn't something I knew I was going to be able to pursue. I got to thinking, I always wanted to write. I had tried to write a number of times, and I thought, I need a creative outlet, so let me switch to that. And with the encouragement of the former wife, sat down and actually was able to, having started a book a number of times, I was able to sit down and finish one. Of course, it was nearly unpublishable. It was written so poorly, but I had no idea what I was doing, which was probably a good thing, because I didn't realize all the different, how ridiculous it was for me to think I could do that. Through joining writers groups and going to writers conferences and that sort of thing, really put an effort in learning the craft, and was able to rewrite the book a whole bunch of different times, and was fortunate enough to get it published.
How long do you think it was before, when you first started thinking like, oh, maybe I'm going to write this book, before you really got serious about it and decided this thing has to get written?
The problem was I kind of had the outline or an idea as to the protagonist who I wanted. And everybody says it's modeled after me. And to some extent, there is definitely similarities. I always wanted to have someone with that outsider look to it, somebody from out of state or outside the environment of the Chicago Police Department. There's a lot of the guys and girls that are on there have family that already have been police, and then they decide to pursue the same career, which doesn't necessarily give them an advantage other than they already have some knowledge of what to expect. When I went to the city, I had thought, I had this little bit microcosm experience of this Cedar Square West apartment complex. That certainly gave me eye-opening experiences, because I was a suburbanite from southern Minneapolis. When I started in Inglewood, I started a journal. And I said, let me journal my nights in on the job. I think for 6 to 8 months, something like that. But we were so busy and there's so much going on, and that's how it ended up coming to a close. I kind of had a protagonist in mind, but I didn't really have a plot as to what happened. As much as I like characters and character-driven stories, I saw my strong suit being action and more of a thriller kind of aspect as opposed to a mystery aspect. I know it gets put into police procedurals. So I really wasn't thinking of what category am I going to fit into, or what genre are they going to pigeonhole my story into. At the time, I was reading John Sanford a lot, which was a writer out of Minneapolis that was writing about Minneapolis Police Homicide Unit. And he was my mom's favorite author. So she was the one that hooked me up going to him. But this is going back after I had the book written. I started going to author signings. And one of the ones I went to was John Sanford. So when I went up to buy a couple books from him, I handed him my business card. I think one of the ones maybe you even made, and told him, I said, I'm a police officer in Chicago and I've written a book. I'd really love to be able to pick your brain if you had time to read a little bit of it. And he's like, I don't do that because then I get sued that I stole ideas and this sort of thing. And I said, that's okay, no problem. I said, my mom loves you, and I've always been a big fan. And he got done signing a couple. I bought my copy and a copy for my mom. And he's like, you know what? Fuck it. Give me your card, put your address on it and your phone number. I'll give you a call. So then we started talking on the phone occasionally. He asked me to send me the manuscript, which he really liked. It needed a lot of work, but he really liked it. Because at the time when I'd done, I know your question was, how do you get all this stuff together? I had little instances that I had taken notes on. Like I was stuck on a Dan Ryan in the wintertime, and it was in the middle of the night, and there was a traffic jam. And this was unusual. In Chicago, in LA, there's traffic jam all the time. Been out there to visit my buddies, and there's always a traffic jam. 3 o'clock in the morning, traffic's crawling. So in Chicago, it's not always the case. So I'm driving home, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's traffic's crawling. And as we get up to where the snarl is, there's a couple of state police crime scene cars and trucks, and state police cars, a couple unmarked cars on the side of the road. And they seem to be examining something as I drive by. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be cool if it was, your informant or, some big business person that was killed and dumped on the side of the road in the snowstorm. Who's see? So I that kind of went back into my internal computer to percolate. In Cabrini, we responded right at the end of the shift. We had 2 guys that hated coming in, and they always did what they called their final pass. They said, we're going to do a final pass, and it was kind of like a jinx. That means we're going to stay late because we're going to find some shit to get involved in. Their final pass, we're all started heading into the station. I think my partner and I probably were walking up the stairs in the office, because the office in the 18th District TAC office was on the 2nd floor. And the dispatcher comes up with an explosion. We got an explosion at 1150 60 Sedgwick, and then guys doing their final pass is like, yeah, we heard it, we're on the way. And they get there and the cars are flaming. They're like, we think somebody's inside. So now everybody's running and getting back in their cars and flying over there, which wasn't far from where the station was at the time. Ended up, nobody was in it. Then I started thinking, well, what would that be like if that was your informant? And it occurred to me that would be really cool if that was that cool so much, but that would be a really great plot point if your informant gets blown up in a car. Yeah. So that went into the percolator. So when I finally started thinking about everything that I wanted to do, and I wanted to portray life on the street, I wanted to portray the officers, what they're faced with on a daily basis. I wanted to portray good people in bad situations or in hard situations where they're trying to survive and get out of places, and the way they're being held hostage by gangbangers and that sort of thing, and drug trade and whatnot. So all of that stuff was percolating in the back of my head. And what I started doing was using cards we just bought a house and we got a new refrigerator. I kept the refrigerator box, which of course I was given the green light to go ahead and do it because I talked about it so much and she knew I was working on it. She gave me the green light to try it. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take this box. I put the box in the spare bedroom where we had the computer set up. It's like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, I got an idea. And I stuck it on the box until I had this kind of plot set. And then I'd say, okay, where the hole's at, I write something on the index card, put it up there. And then I got it and started going around, okay, this would happen first. And point of view characters at the time, this is really showing my naivete, is I was jumping into everybody's head, more of an omniscient point of view, which in this day and age is frowned upon by the literary. That's something they used to do in the olden days. But nevertheless, I like the opportunity to get in somebody's head and tell their story, even if it's just the Minuteman on the side of the road that you're only going to see the one time. I thought his experience of discovering something grisly on the side of the road in the snowstorm would contribute to the sense tension in the book. I've been told that, not too many publishers are going to want to look at something that has that type of point of view.
It's interesting that because that omniscience continues into Chicago Justice, the sequel. Correct? I mean, as I'm actually working my way through it. So even though people have advised perhaps not pursuing that style, you've continued in that style with the sequel to Out of Cabrini, Chicago Justice, where we do actually see into the thought process behind the characters as they come and go, which is interesting. I didn't realize that was kind of a frowned upon practice. So,
well, it's frowned upon in the fact that you're in everybody's head.
Yeah.
Okay. And in Out of Cabrini, I'm in just about everybody's head. I think I do a good job of telling you ahead of time, hey, this is whose head you're in, and you're seeing it through their eyes. I ended up having the good fortune of going to a number of book signings when Out of Cabrini came out, because Out of Cabrini was published by a small publisher that nevertheless was legitimate. And I'm not saying my guys aren't legitimate now, but they're smaller. And Five Star, who would publish the first book, was imprint of Cengage and Thorndike and all this stuff. So, and they had done library books. So they were breaking into the retail market when they bought my book. They'd probably been doing it for a little less than 2 years. So they had established reviewers that they would send copies of the book to. They call them ARCs, advanced reading copies. Out of Cabrini got a really good review from Library Journal, Kirkus, Book List. So the first print run of 1,500 books was sold out before the actual print publishing date. I had pretty good momentum going into its release. One of the book signings was up on the north side in Lincoln Square, I think, and at a place called The Bookseller. And I was part of the panel of 4 authors. One of the authors that was on there was a young lady from St. Xavier who had a short story book. And at the end of it, another guy approached me, said, I was here for Melissa, I think her name was, but I listened to you talk. Do you have an agent? I said, no. He goes, do you mind if I introduce you to mine? Long story short, a couple months later, I get a call from an agent from New York that said, I think I can help you out. I'd like to represent you, but here, do some homework. I want you to read Ken Follett's first novel, Paper Money. I read Paper Money, and it read a lot like Out of Cabrini, in that he was in a lot of different people's heads. So afterwards, the agent and I were talking. He's like, listen, we don't do the omniscient point of view no more. He goes, you can pick 4 to 6 heads to get into. That's it. So that's why Chicago Justice has a more limited point of view. Now, Stand for the Dead, get a chance to read that. I'm only in the protagonist's head. But it's still a third person. It's not a first person. It's not I did that. It's a real limited, tight third person, only in the head of the protagonist. And so you're seeing it kind of through his eyes, but from a little bit of a distance. It's challenging trying to figure out what point of view characters you want to use.
Mhm.
Writing the third Macbeth novel now, trying to figure out whose point of view am I going to use. There are some people that make it from the second book into the third, but do I need to use them as point of view characters? Do I have new people I want to use to drive the story forward? And that's basically what it comes down to, is how do we get the story out to the reader?
Your characters in Out of Cabrini and Chicago Justice tend to be good and bad. You have good guys and you have bad guys. And some authors, I understand, make their bad guys almost like there's something sympathetic about them, something endearing, something that makes it a little bit more conflicted. Like, I really should I like this guy? He's the bad guy. He does bad things. And we see this in Hollywood and we see these in books and things like that. It makes that, I think, certainly a more complex character. But unless I missed something, or correct me if I'm wrong, but do you feel that your characters are certainly more good guys and bad guys? I mean, cops and robbers, you got,
I guess there's an aspect to that. Now, maybe you haven't gotten to the point yet. I try and give the main antagonist some likable aspect to him. Beth's mom and dad are in nursing home, having suffered strokes and dementia and whatnot. And this character, Huggins, his mom's in the nursing home, and he visits his mom in the nursing home and is horrified by the condition she's in. And he sets the record straight with the people working there. So I thought that to some extent was making, I don't know if it would go so far as to make him sympathetic because he's kind of a monster. But nevertheless, that a little bit of that was to give him something that he's not just an evil person.
That's it. Yeah, I have gotten past that point. I'm about let's say about 3/4 of the way through. So
Okay.
I'm making my way, and I did get to that point. Now that you mentioned it, I hadn't thought about it that way, but it does. I felt it was a very real scene, as I do with all the scenes in your book. Personally, find it very real in terms of the way the stories play out and the scenes play out. I haven't seen anything that maybe said that couldn't have happened, right? That seems to be really a stretch. I mean, it's very plausible the way the story goes down, which is, again, one of the nice things about the shows or books. I'm thinking of TV shows and movies that seem more realistic than the ones that are overly Hollywoodized, where all of a sudden your normal people characters can do these extra human things that probably wouldn't happen. These are all very real situations with very, I think, real characters. So that's interesting. And I hadn't thought about that scene specifically as being that more humanizing thing, but it certainly is. And these are two men from completely different worlds and goals, yet they still, at the end of the day, love their mothers, right? They love their parents, and they care about them. And again, very real. I've seen it myself, as an officer. Even the hardest criminals still love their mothers, right? You see that all the time, that there's still a respect and a care for, especially moms, I think, in their lives.
When I created Huggins and had him in Out of Cabrini, the first thing the agent said is, we got to get him out of jail because he is an incredible character. We got to get him out of jail and have some kind of conflict, which is, at the time, I don't know if I really had a good idea as to where I was going with the sequel for it. With the way the publishing industry is, and readers in general, most of them want serial stories, people that they can come back to and feel comfortable reading about. So just about all publishers want to hear, this is part of a series. This is the startup of the series. And certainly I had that in mind. and I had ideas as to kind of what I wanted to do. But when the agent said, "Hey, we gotta get this guy out of prison," at first I was a little reluctant, and I was like, that's actually a really good idea, because Huggins is definitely a character that all the people in my writers group were having a reaction to. And one of the women that helped me the most with the editing and the turning out of Cabrini from a first attempt manuscript by somebody that has no clue what they're doing to an actual manuscript that could be sold, she absolutely loved and said Huggins scared her to death. And she was one of the ladies that went into courtrooms and watched trials for her writing so that she would understand some of the things that happened in court and what was being said as to what happened. So she recognized the realism behind him. And she said he frightened the hell out of her. And she thought he was an amazing character, and that I had succeeded in making a real memorable character. So with that in mind, I was like, okay. And then with some of the things going on in our society, it became pretty evident how to get him out of prison. And then that ended up the main point of Chicago Justice.
Yeah, he's a very powerful, dynamic character, certainly in Chicago Justice. I do think you did justice to his character, bringing him out that way. You really see it in the scenes. You really see what kind of dude this guy is. You really get that boiling to the surface, I think, even more so in Chicago Justice.
I always say the best compliments come from police officers that say, "Man, you got it right." So that means a lot to me.
I wonder if you get feedback, or if you have any insights on your audiences, police versus non-police audience members, and how they react to your book.
Most of the people that have had access to me were either police officers or family members of police officers. So a lot of the feedback I've gotten has been kind of biased in that sense of police related people that are, that I see on a daily basis. The women at the academy told me I was now an honorary brother because I got the African American community correct. Yeah. And I took a lot of effort to do that. I would like to have more feedback from the non-police to see how they pick up on stuff. And I don't think they're going to pick up on everything.
Well, as we put this out into the world, hopefully we'll be able to get some non-police readers to actually send us some feedback and share their thoughts on the stories with you. So that'll be one of our goals, and hopefully we'll get some of those comments. That would be really, really great. So we're talking about, you mentioned that some people that does this really happen? I can't believe this really happens. If this was really what you experienced day in, day out, like I think you even said, I'd probably shoot myself or something or whatever, or go crazy. Well, I mean, if anybody bothers to take a look around, again, we are all too familiar with it within the law enforcement community. We know what people deal with and what officers, I mean, we have a very large suicide rate among public safety and police officers. And in Chicago, I think we unfortunately lead the country in officers who die by suicide. And because and some of that very much, part of that equation, without a doubt, but would seem to be that it has to go back to some of the things they experience on the street and some of those realities. Police talk with non-police, and we share our war stories or our police stories. I think that's what people find them so fascinating, because sometimes I believe they can't believe what we're telling them. But those are realities that officers do encounter.
You're absolutely right. The number of suicides is just insane, and it's gotten worse. So I think over the past couple of months, it seems like it's slowed down a little bit. God bless. Knock out wood. Yeah. And I've thought about exploring that. Is that something people want to read about? and probably not.
Yeah.
But it's nevertheless something to consider.
Another friend of mine has written a book, a small book, a reflection on a lot of the psychological challenges that not just police officers but people in general face. So, but that would definitely be something worth thinking about. So one of the things you did mention was that you come up with themes or ideas like, oh, I really want to explore that more, and like the relationship with say Macbeth and his parents, and he's distant from them, and so that kind of comes out. And so I believe you mentioned that these are things you jotted down, like I want to really explore this a little bit more.
It shows and it more rounds out Macbeth as a character. What are some of his motivations? Why is he feeling some way? Because in Chicago Justice, he has conversation with his mom and dad on the phone, and he's feeling guilty. He's knows he's not in their life as much as he should be. He's 400 and some miles away. He talking on the phone used to be effective. Now it's not anymore. Just how he's feeling about that, how he's trying to almost ignore it, compartmentalize it so he can continue on doing what he needs to be doing. But yet by the same token, realizing that he has a responsibility to his mom and dad and his sister who's keeping the boat going forward up in Minnesota where his mom and dad live. To some extent, I think it's me trying to get some of that on the page and trying to get into that emotion to see if I can portray that emotion and maybe even explore what I was going through to some extent. Make it, of course, makes it a little bit more personal. You mentioned sometimes you put your characters in a situation and you actually end up surprising yourself with the way they handle that situation that may not have been how you initially intended that scene to go or the way they were going to respond in that situation. But then here they respond in a different way, even though you're writing it. Right. Any incidents in particular that stand out in your mind that you could share a glimpse of one of those things where you thought it was going to go this way and then, oh, look, it went this way, and this way was actually much better? First writers conference I ever went to, about 96, 97, something like that. I'm sitting in the audience listening to a writer talk. I don't remember who it was offhand. But they were talking about how this character just did something totally unexpected and took over the story. And I'm like, okay, that sounds kind of silly. How would it happen? It's all coming from your brain, And sure enough, that I found the one scene, and you guys used it with the Rufus walking his dog, finding a body on the railroad property, was one of those scenes. I thought it was just going to be a little bitty, and it's still a little bitty, but the dog kind of emerged more as a character in a sense than the guy. I thought the guy was the one that's going to be the bigger character than the dog. And I think the dog is as big, if not bigger character than the guy was. So that was something I didn't really expect, the way that took off. When Macbeth is talking with the Hispanic girl in the 9th District, I hadn't expected that kind of dynamic between the two in some kind of way. When I was writing it, it just kind of sparked and happened. That kind of discovery is really fascinating. It's one of the reasons why usually I would like to just sit down and write as opposed to watch TV. Mm-hmm. What discovery I'm going to make in the writing. I sit here with a big grin on my face listening to you as you were recounting the part from Out of Cabrini with Lucy in the 9th District. Is that what you were describing? And I'm smiling because I remember it so vividly as I read it, because again, one, it was very real to an experience that I think many officers have and can relate to, because it's a very real scene. And yet I love how you actually said, like, that wasn't necessarily something that was going to be
part of the storyline, and it doesn't have I was actually waiting to see if it was going to develop into more of the storyline later and out of Cabrini, which it really doesn't too much. She has her part to play, and which is great. It's part of the creative process as a designer and myself. Sometimes you go down one path, and then next thing you know, voila! Oh, look what we just did here, and this is pretty cool. You also used a great word that I think is especially applicable to policing, and that's compartmentalize. And I think that people ask, if this is what you're seeing day in, day out, how could you possibly get through your days? How would you possibly go back another day to work, right? People have asked you that all the time. And I do really believe it's that compartmentalization that officers do between doing the job and what they see and what they experience, and being able to say, I have a job to do, I have something to do here, I cannot get emotionally involved in the situation or these people, even if it's a small child, the elderly. Officers will tell you it's always, an incident that happens with a small child is always the most difficult to get beyond oftentimes. Just because there's always a special place in your heart for children and again, the seniors. We kind of lump everybody else in the middle because we're in that middle with them. But, we always have for those that can't defend themselves, right? That's always with the law enforcement. It's the young and innocent, and it's the old and elderly and feeble or what have you. So we have special places in our heart for them. But it's the compartmentalizing that gets us through our days.
I remember taking the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI, which a lot of people took to get on the job, and had to take to try and go to narcotics the one time I applied. And I remember you had to go talk to the psychologist afterwards. And the psychologist tells me, he says, Dave, I think you're too sensitive to be a policeman. I don't think this is a good career choice for you. And I often think about that and about how I've gone through, and to my understanding, I'm not overly scarred. I sleep pretty good. I don't have nightmares like some people report having. So I've had a bunch of, I don't know if I want to call them close calls, might over dramatize the events, but I've been shot at. I've been involved in fights, knocked down, drag out fights, and chases and all that good stuff. And I think I'm okay, And I keep thinking about the psychologist because I came to really trust that test, the MMPI, because during my interviews I had to take it 3 or 4 times, and always had to go talk to the psychologist afterwards. And some of the insight the psychologist had from reading the results of my test, I was a little scared that it was like witchcraft. And when he tells me this, I was, just a little taken back by it, because he seemed pretty damn genuine that he thought that this wasn't a good career choice for me.
I experienced, again, very similar. I think we actually share many similar things in our backgrounds. I also hold a degree in fine art, and tend to be in the squishier side of degrees, and calculus was never my friend either. And so a lot of things like this. And again, I always tell the story. My mom cried for the first month when I told her that I was becoming a police officer. Oh, you're going to become hard. You're going to become bitter, because I, again, kind of a more friendlier, happy, sensitive person. And, but I also have made it through. So there is a place for those who find themselves perhaps on the sensitive side of the spectrum, to make it as a valid and successful career as police officer. I think you need it. Especially I think in policing, we can talk policing a moment here today. I think they're almost forcing police to be overly sensitive to all these other issues and realities that departments and politics and society are putting on the officers. So you actually, I think those that have that emotional intelligence and ability to be in control of their own emotions and understand others are certainly desirable traits in the police today, as long as, again, you balance it with the reality of things that we do see and knowing when soft goes off and harder comes on. You have to be able to manage those situations in split seconds oftentimes.
No, agreed. And today's policing is a whole lot different than what we experienced in the 80s and 90s. So my hat's off to people doing it today. I mean, I know I'm involved in it, but Bridgeview is a unique community. It's not Chicago, though it's close enough to experience some of the same stuff. So, yeah, I don't relish the thought of what the officers are experiencing today with the societal expectations, in my opinion, unreasonable expectations on a number of fronts, in that the police tend to be the final authority on everything and haven't been trained for most of it.
A fun side question here. If you were going to sit down with Macbeth to have a cup of coffee or a couple of drinks and a pizza somewhere, what would you talk about, or what do you or maybe even that's it. Do you ever have like a conversation? Have you ever had do you have conversations with him in terms of what might he say or do, or maybe not? I'm just thinking that could be a strategy in writing too.
It's a kind of a good question, Russ. I've never really given consideration with sitting down and having a conversation with myself in a character. So much more that what I tend to do is, okay, if Macbeth sits down with Zito, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? In Macbeth and his landlord. His landlord's named after Sanford's real name, which is John Camp. So, and that's kind of a tribute I'm giving to him, even though he's a comic foil. Nevertheless, I really wanted to, because he put my mom in a book. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah. He used my mom's name because he hates names. He hates having to come up with names. So I'm sure after talking with me one day or something, he used my mom's name.
I bet Mom loved that.
Yeah. Well, he just said, okay, I needed, and it ended up being a female assassin name. It was one of her aliases. So, but nevertheless, I guess I see the characters having conversations with themselves, and I'm kind of like sitting in the booth behind them listening. I listen to conversations all the time, especially when I was working in the city and, listening to guys in the back seat of the squad car talk to each other. It just gives you ideas about what characters might say.
What character was the most challenging for you to write about? Did you find any of them that you struggled with a little bit?
All the police characters I found challenging. And
really?
The reason I say that, because I really feel a responsibility for the men and women on the street. And I don't want to portray them in a way that's going to negatively impact how people see them. Also, I'm always struggling with, am I giving away secrets that we don't want the bad guys to know about how we work? I imply out of Cabrini, there's that one scene. One of the guys is hearing a foot chase out in Cabrini, and they grab the guy, they get a gun, and somebody comes in to make a complaint, and the guy at the desk, Macbeth's normal partner that's on light duty because of an injury, assumes that this person's complaining about Macbeth and Zito, who arrested this kid with a gun after a foot chase. So he's assuming that they tuned him up or beat him up. And he thinks that this person's coming in to complain about that. So I'm always thinking about, okay, you got a foot chase or you're fighting with a guy. how do we portray that realistically, and yet how do you can you justify, what the characters are doing?
Thank you, Dave. Dave Case, author of Out of Cabrini, Stand for the Dead, and Chicago Justice. Books are available on your website, www.davecasebooks.com, as well as on Amazon and through your publisher, Genius Publishing. But I understand all the links are there on your website as well. I understand also your publisher will give a discount if they purchase more than one of your books.
Very, very generous of them.
Yeah, so 20% off any 2 or more Dave Case books through Genius Publishing. So again, the link on your website at www.davecasebooks.com.